Everyone knows Air and Ink as a dynamic duo. In fact, I would go as far to say that it is one of the most popular ships in the Undertale fandom. I don't really blame a lot of people for shipping them. I'm a sucker for the whole bad guy dating the good guy, and it's really complicated and all this stuff. It can create a really interesting dynamic between two characters who are fighting for opposite goals and yet love the other person who stands for something that their whole identity is against. I mean, it's pretty cool. The protector of creation and the destroyer of creation essentially being in love. What a cool concept. If you couldn't tell by my sarcasm, I'm not the hugest fan of Air Inc., though I can comprehend why people like the ship, and though I don't think it's a bad dynamic or badly written, I don't tend to enjoy it. And it's not because the ship itself annoys me, nor the shippers. I know a lot of people who are anti-Air Inc. tend to hate the shippers and how annoying they are, but at the same time, a lot of people who shipped them back in the day were young kids, so their boundaries about ships and stuff and shipping culture was a little bit different. I'm not gonna get mad at a 12-year-old who is upset that I ship Air Mare and they ship Air Inc., because 9 out of 10 times, it's usually a child who doesn't fully understand boundaries yet, and manners. So, no, the shippers aren't really the problem for me. And the actual ship itself doesn't tend to bother me, though a lot of portrayals that I see of it I don't tend to like. I don't really like people making Ink a jerk and disrespecting Air's phobia. I don't think that's funny, I don't think that's cute, but that's a fandom issue rather than just an Air Inc. issue. Everyone makes fun of Air's phobia, there's really no getting around it, it's pretty unfortunate. Even ships I like with Air make fun of it. It's not necessarily the shippers and the dynamic. Everyone does it, so stop blaming Air Inc. primarily for that. Everyone makes fun of Air's phobia, and it's bad. We shouldn't be doing that. So, while there are issues with some of the portrayals of this dynamic, of the whole boundary breaking, and the fact that it can be abusive in some situations, although that doesn't really stop anybody, we love toxic yaoi in this house, those are not the reasons I don't like it. I don't like it because it's so repetitive. The whole concept of the good guy dating the bad guy is really, really repeated in media. It's become even mainstream at this point, where it's not just a fandom ship thing, it's become a very big trope in the media with romance novels and romance movies. I mean, I think my favorite example, even though they're not canon, is Lego Batman and Joker. It's a whole satire about the good guy and bad guy fighting as if they're in a situationship and then making it official as being each other's greatest enemy. Like, it's just making a joke of the whole entire dynamic, especially of Joker and Batman, which is, the epitome of good guy dating the bad guy. They're notoriously known. So even in current times with kids' movies, these tropes have become very apparent. So much so that satire movies can even be made about them with pre-existing characters that are like famous. Everyone knows Batman and Joker, and a lot of people tend to ship them. Well, I find this trope very cute, and I do think it can be executed in very, unique ways. However, with Air and Ink, I feel like with this fandom specifically, we're missing out on a lot of potential with them. In a fandom where there are millions of possibilities that people can indulge in, the most common one happens to be Air and Ink being romantically involved, which again is not a problem. However, it is so repetitive that I cannot stand it. In fact, I would love to see more platonic dynamics of them, not even QPR dynamics, straight up them choosing to be friends. A big problem that I'm noticing online nowadays with shipping is that though I like to make crack ships in kids media or new movies that drop, I still can recognize when a movie is about friendship rather than actual romance. I can jokingly say that I ship Anne of Green Gables with her little girl toy right here, but I don't actually mean it, because I know deep down their relationship at its core is about the friendship of girlhood, which is important to represent in media. And for a game that is primarily about platonic dynamics and essentially found family, It's really interesting that the whole entire fandom focuses more on shipping rather than actual platonic dynamics. Hell, I even erased any form of shipping from Roseverse because I wanted it to be primarily focused on found family. I felt like that was the most authentic to Undertale's true message. Finding family even in people that are completely different from you, because found family is all about finding your family. And that's where I'm going to dive more into Error and Ink as a dynamic. Error and Ink are notorious enemies, infamous enemies, if you will. They fight in practically almost every multiverse, and usually don't get along, or they have a weird frenemies type dynamic where they will talk after they fight and watch movies together, which is funny. And even if they did meet in their actual media, there probably wouldn't be a lot of fighting between them in the first place. They would probably just kind of stay friends and stay out of each other's way, or not even interact at all. I mean, in their canons, Error and Ink don't know each other. They're not from the same multiverse. So therefore, in their actual canon multiverse created by their creators, they don't know each other. Now, you could argue that Ink might know of Error and might know there's errors out there, but he doesn't have one. However, the most popular dynamic between them is of course them absolutely loathing each other, or at least having very complex feelings towards each other, which is why people like to throw love into the mixture. However, platonic love can be as important and as heartbreaking for them. I know people like their tragic yaoi, but I want you to sit down and walk with me as I explain how complex their relationship could be if they choose to be family instead of partners. Error and Ink both fight for their own ideals. It depends on the multiverse whether or not Error's ideals is made of logic, or he's just a little bit crazy. However, you could argue the same thing about Ink in a lot of dynamics. I mean, he's not really crazy in Underverse, but he's definitely needing some therapy. If we keep in mind that these two are immortal, it's very clear that they probably fight badly. At least if we're looking at a multiverse where they really hate each other. Constant deaths probably occur between these two, which makes it very hard for them to actually grow any attachment to the other because that's the person that haunts their nightmares. I don't think Ink can dream. I don't even think he sleeps, but that could possibly be a reason why he doesn't sleep. Maybe he can, but he chooses not to because what's going to be waiting for him on the other side? That's something that he probably doesn't want to deal with. However, I don't know if he can actually dream, that's just me saying that. Error definitely can. Error can dream about Ink one day killing him. Error can have nightmares about all the things that Ink could do to get payback for all the times that he tortured him. This creates a very tense dynamic, where in multiverses where they're not fighting all the time and yet still have this horrible past, it can be a little bit complicated to talk to each other or look at each other after everything that happened. I mean, that's someone that you watched probably get brutalized by your own hands, and now you have to just talk to them in certain situations. It can be awkward. It can be even scary. But this is where I think throwing in romantic love can be a little bit messy. Romance can be messy. You can develop feelings for someone even if you know they're a toxic person, and you can still also love someone who hurts you. I'm not saying Error and Ink are notoriously going to be abusive in every single dynamic where they date. I'm just saying that forming a love based on a connection like this can be a little bit tricky. Because romance can also build because of codependency and being fearful. It can also be a fawn response, which either of them could be displaying. One isn't worse in this situation than the other. And though there could be stories of them genuinely falling in love despite all the things that have happened to them, that the other has done to them, it's still up for debate whether or not this is based on a codependent relationship or a trauma bond. Again, I don't want to say that every single dynamic between them is destined to be toxic. That's just not true because every single dynamic that someone makes is a little bit more complex. We also have to keep in mind that they're immortals, so their sense of morality is definitely going to be different. Especially with Ink and how he views certain people. The lines will always be a bit blurred, but we cannot sit here and deny that fighting someone so brutally and then forming a romantic relationship with them where they possibly still fight pretty brutally, it can be definitely unhealthy. Which may be the point in a lot of media based on Error Ink. which I completely understand that. But at the same time, if you're wanting a happy-go-lucky relationship between these two, it'll take a lot of work and a lot of heavy lifting from both characters to fully reach a point where they can trust each other in this relationship and not have it be built on a fawn response or them desperate for someone to understand them, and so they look for that in their enemy. Romance can also happen out of the blue. There might not be a lot of build-up towards it. In multiple cases, there is, but have you ever watched a movie where people are screaming at each other and then they just start kissing? Yeah, a lot of the time there's not really romantic feelings attached to an action like that, because anger actually excites you, in a way. Anger and that type of feeling is very linked together. It doesn't automatically mean that you actually love the person that you're kissing after you just screamed at. It could just be a reaction that your body is doing because of the influx of emotions. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be together with this person forever. The movies get that wrong. Something like love can be very brash and thrown around and messy. And so can found family. However, it requires a different set of expectations and trust. When you find someone that you can trust enough to see as your family, not just a romantic partner or a friend, someone that you confide in about everything in your life, that you will go to if you ever need anything, compared to the one that you had due to your blood, it's a very different set of trust and expectation. This is a person or people that you trust with your whole entire soul, and you can argue the same thing for romantic relationships. However, found family is always centered around the fact that you are picking that person to be in your life and be your family, because your ties to who you actually are in your past is complicated, and you want to find comfort in other people. Humans have the innate sense to stick with their family, even in the most abusive situations. And it's why even abusive parents still feel the need to protect their kids from other people, even if they are also causing harm. It's the animal instinct to protect young and to also cling to the parental figures in your life. You stick to the pack no matter what, even if they hurt you, because that's your pack. You have to stay with them. But with modern society, we know that's not the case. If you're getting hurt by your family, you can leave and find your own. It's becoming more commonplace to say that your family isn't the people that you're born with, but rather that you choose. If you choose to keep them in your life and reveal your whole self and grow up with them, then that's your family. Error and ink. Picking each other to be found family or just friends is a big step for both of them. After fighting for so many years and struggling to form actual connections with a lot of people, them choosing each other despite it all to just stay platonic, not label themselves with anything romantic, and rather being there as close friends, is a big deal. Ink struggles with making friends in his day-to-day life. I have multiple videos covering this type of topic, and usually his only friend that can fully see him is Dream. Besides that, Ink doesn't have any friends. He has his dads, but those aren't really friends, those are father figures. They'll always be a little bit higher up than him because of that parental guidance. He doesn't really have any friends on his same level, or that can comprehend who he is and still love him through it. But Error could. Error, who also struggles with having friends, as we see with what happened with Blue, would also desperately need some sort of connection. I mean, he's alone in the anti-void talking to puppets all the time. He's not necessarily the best at, communicating with other people that, actually have souls. Error also probably would feel like an outcast if we're looking at the multiverses where he's forced into this role. I mean, nobody wants to be friends with someone who causes destruction, and though Nightmare probably would, that's my bias speaking. In a lot of multiverses, even Nightmare wouldn't want anything to do with him. So, Ink coming up to him, knowing that they don't get along, knowing that Error hates him, and that Ink kind of hates him too, but still sticking by his side, and growing to love him and care for him, and start to see him in a different light. A friendship, a connection that he hardly gets, is very sweet. If they ever do reach the boundaries of found family and start to see each other as brothers, then that makes it even sweeter. These are two very lonely gods that are basically around forever, constantly stuck in their position with no way out. Ink doesn't have any other choice than support the creators, because if he doesn't, he basically dies. Error doesn't really have much of a choice or the sanity to do anything but destroy. because if he doesn't, his memories will haunt him too much, and he'll continue to lose his sanity. There's not a lot of people in the multiverse that can fully understand what it's like to be forced in this position. Sure, Dream can, but again, Error doesn't have that person. And in a lot of multiverses, Dream and Ink even fight, and then Ink doesn't have that person. Error and Ink would have already been fighting at this point. They would have already seen each other at their weakest, and have also brought them to their weakest. There is nothing the other person can say that can hurt them anymore, because they've been hurt enough. The amount of trust and care that would have to be between them to reveal themselves and be vulnerable without fighting having to be involved is something that Error and Ink both kind of need. Though they are each other's greatest enemies, they could be each other's greatest strength and friends. Ink's not good with boundaries, so Error's phobia low-key makes him have to learn. Error's not good at holding long communication with people, so he allows Ink to do that for him, letting him just ramble while Error's able to just quietly do whatever he needs to. Ink could show him the beauty of stupid anomalies by just smiling at him, because that's his little brother smiling at him. And there can't be anything disgusting about that. And if you want angst, I can give you angst. For all the people that like the dream and nightmare dynamic, and yet want to make it even more brutal, having both parties being able to remember the other and not want to actually fight, and trying to sneak off where other people can't see so they can actually talk, like a family does, without the secrecy and trying to hide and continuing to hurt each other on the battlefield, well, there's Error and Ink for ya. Imagine how many times Error has to basically patch up Ink after they fight each other. How many times Ink cries because he broke Error's hand but knows he can't go visit him that day because he has to go fight Nightmare in the game, so he can't even check to see if his brother's okay. Imagine if other people find out and then try to keep them away from each other. That tragedy of them desperately wanting to cling to the one person that can understand them in the multiverse, that loves them for who they are, despite the fact that they're supposed to be enemies, that it's in the name that they're supposed to be enemies, and they have to be separated from each other. When the one person who comforts you when you cry is the same person that haunts your nightmares and makes you scared to fight again. They are so capable of being such tragic friends/brothers. Like, guys, come on, I get it. I get the toxic romance, but imagine the actual, horror and sadness of them being friends and brothers and having to fight against each other on different sides. It's Nightmare and Dream, but so much more tragic because they chose to be this way. They weren't born in this situation. They grew to care about each other. They grew to be like brothers. And now they're forced into a repetitive cycle that they themselves build upon. And they can't back out now. And one last point. Ink is Arrow Ace, and Arrow isn't really interested in romance in general. I don't think he's Arrow Ace, but he definitely doesn't really seem interested in having a connection with anybody. So I think them just being friends and being a family is a lot better dynamic for both of their characters anyways. Kamyat thinks that Arrow Ink is cute, but at the same time likes them as being pals as well. Which I think there should be more of. I think the tragedy of picking your family out of your worst enemy and then continuing having to fight in this cycle with no chance of escape, or them being your family, being the reason why the fighting ends, is a great story idea that should be expanded upon them. Shipping is great. However, with these two characters, they would be so interesting as just a dynamic where it's two friends that don't have anyone else in the multiverse except each other. And if you tack on a relationship to that type of dynamic where they don't have anyone else, it doesn't seem as genuine of a love. It just kind of seems like it's out of necessity and also just the desperation of not being alone. But picking your enemy to be your closest friend and confidant, and also seeing them as your family, is a lot less of a desperate measure and more of a fact that you genuinely see the person and care about them, and love them, and want to stick by them. They could still want to build a life with each other. However, that life would consist of Error coming over and making fun of Ink's plants, or Ink going over to Error's house to watch telenovelas together, Is this video an analysis? No, I tricked you all just so I could talk about ink and brother propaganda. But in a way, it kind of is. If our fandom is centered around the fact that this is a multiverse and there's millions of possibilities of different dynamics and situations, why isn't there more of them being best friends? I need it this instant. I need more Brother Error ink. Please and thank you. If you like Error ink, I don't hate you. I also don't hate the ship. You're not gonna find it on my channel. It's gonna be all platonic, so I do ask if you go watch any of my other videos not to comment about the ship, because they tend to usually be like blood brothers in my content. I understand why it's a very popular ship, but I think the dynamic would work just as well as platonic, if not better, and a lot more healthier if it stayed platonic rather than romantic. I also think platonic dynamics in this fandom need to be explored a lot more. I love shipping. Look at my channel. I am the Air, Mare, and Drink CEO. However, I also recognize that platonic dynamics in this fandom is like a drought. There's not a lot of found family in a game that's based on found family. And if this video still makes you mad because I said that they would probably work better as a platonic duo, then you probably don't want to hear about my take that after death is probably the exact same thing, and they would probably be a lot more interesting if they were a found family or just friends that came together, but let's end this video before I get more people mad. Bye!